Hello. Recently I read an article in the Sunday Herald and it was about a significant melting event that occurred on the Greenland ice sheet. Now normally every Northern Hemisphere summer about 50% of the ice sheet will undergo some form of melting, but NASA satellites show that this year in July 97% of the ice sheet underwent some form of melting. Now in the article the author and his source very clearly and confidently state that this is due to anthropogenic global warming. When I read the original NASA statement, I read something quite interesting. Ice core studies in Greenland show that Greenland undergoes a melting event, a significant melting event like this, every 150 years. So exactly how significant is anthropogenic global warming when this happens every 150 years? Okay. So before we start talking about anthropogenic global warming, we really need to understand, in general terms, the greenhouse effect. Now here is a little diagram that I've drawn up. Basically, down here we have Earth, and hopefully you recognise that as the sun. What happens is the sun emits thermal energy, and that radiates down to Earth. Some of that thermal energy is radiated back out in space by our atmosphere. The thermal energy that actually makes it to the surface of the Earth, that energy warms up the Earth. Now, some of that heat is reflected back out into space, either by ice or clouds. Ice cover like Greenland. And our atmosphere, actually the greenhouse gases, will trap some of that heat. The main greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, water vapour and methane. Now we need greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases trap some of that thermal energy and warm the planet. If we didn't have greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, the average surface temperature on Earth would be minus 18 degrees. The problem is, some scientists believe that the greenhouse gases are accumulating to such an extent that the globe is beginning to warm too much. Now, carbon is a basic building block of life. Fossil fuels are essentially ancient plants and animals, like Danny the dinosaur, that have died, and after a long period of time and the application of a great deal of heat and pressure, they have been converted into fossil fuels. That includes coal, natural gas and oil. Now, when we harvest those fossil fuels and we burn them or combust them, carbon dioxide is released back into the atmosphere. Since the Industrial Revolution, fossil fuels has been fueling our progress. The combustion of fossil fuels is releasing tons upon tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now, popular global warming theory states that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is now having a direct impact on our climate. It is amplifying the greenhouse effect. There are two measurements that are at the core of popular global warming theory. The first one is this. If you can see that, that is basically the global and hemispheric annual temperature anomalies. Now that's measured from 1860 right through to 2008. Now what you can see is there is an increasing trend, especially since 1980. That is globally, and at the bottom is the southern hemisphere and in the middle is the northern hemisphere. Overall, there's an increasing trend. Now, compare that to measurements of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, this one measures from 1960 through to about 2012. Now, that also shows an increasing trend. Now, I don't have to be a scientist to see that there's a correlation. So popular global warming theory states that the correlation between the increasing global temperatures, the warming of the Earth, and the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is significant. Since the Industrial Revolution, human activities has released huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and it's now having an impact on our climate. Dr. Norman Patterson, a consulting geophysicist, is a very passionate climate skeptic. Now that appears to be the label that we give to any scientist or academic who does not embrace the popular global warming theory. Now, he has concerns about the establishment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It was established in 1994. Now, its role has essentially popularised and institutionalised the scientific theory of anthropogenic global warming. Now, he states that the global warming theory has become a part of our belief system, and scientific objections are being marginalised as public opinion outweighs empirical evidence. Rather than remaining an objective and impartial investigating body, the IPCC, whose role was to assess scientific, technical and socio-economic information and understand the risks of human-induced climate change. That's what their role was. Unfortunately, the IPCC suffered from a perceived bias and ended up reinforcing the ideology of anthropogenic global warming. Examination of peer-reviewed literature reveals that while the scientific community remains genuinely concerned about the effects the melting of the Greenland ice sheet might have on our climate, there does not appear to be a consensus within the scientific community regarding the cause of global warming, which is ultimately an intensification of the greenhouse effect. Many positive and negative feedback loops affect the dynamic climate system of Earth, and several of these variables are still only crudely understood. While the causes of global warming are inconclusive, the Australian government has chosen to apply the precautionary principle. They've introduced a carbon price and are gearing our economy towards renewable energies. Until recently, everything I knew about global warming I learnt through the media. It appears that science is the latest victim of the phenomenon known as popularity. I have learnt from this exercise to look a little closer at the science in future.